My fiancé was folding laundry when she held up my dress shirt, her face going pale. "Is this blood?" I stepped closer, then saw it too. A rust-colored smear across the left sleeve, dried and stiff against the white fabric. The shirt I'd worn to work on Friday, the one I'd tossed in the hamper without looking at it twice. Olivia's hands trembled as she held it up to the light streaming through our bedroom window. The stain was unmistakable. Dark, concentrated near the cuff, with smaller droplets scattered up toward the elbow like someone had shaken their hand and sent it flying. "I don't know," I said, reaching for the shirt. My stomach twisted into something cold and heavy. "I have no memory of bleeding. Let me see." I examined the fabric closely, turning it over in my hands. The blood was definitely dried, probably a day or two old. I checked my arms. No cuts, no scratches, nothing that would explain this. Olivia stepped back, her expression shifting from concern to something harder to read. "Whose blood is it then?" Her voice came out quiet, controlled in that way that meant she was holding back panic. "If it's not yours, where did it come from?" I shook my head, genuinely confused. Maybe I helped someone at work. Maybe there was an accident in the parking garage. But even as I said it, the explanation felt hollow. I would remember helping someone who was bleeding. Wouldn't I? Olivia crossed her arms, the shirt still dangling from one hand. "You would have told me. If something happened, if you helped someone, you would have mentioned it." She was right. We told each other everything. 5 years together, engaged for 8 months, planning a wedding for next spring. We talked about our days every evening over dinner. Friday night I'd come home, kissed her hello, complained about a tedious meeting with the quarterly budget review. Nothing about blood or emergencies or anything remotely unusual. The rest of Sunday passed in uncomfortable silence. Olivia Googled whether bloodstains could transfer from public seating or gym equipment. I called my office building's main number and left a message asking if there had been any medical emergencies on Friday. Neither of us found answers. That night, lying in bed with Olivia's back to me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to reconstruct Friday with perfect clarity. Morning routine, normal. Coffee at the kitchen counter. Traffic was light on the highway. I'd parked on level 3, my usual spot. Walked into the building at 8:17 a.m. I remembered checking my watch. Meetings all morning. Lunch at my desk, leftover pasta Olivia had packed. Afternoon calls. Left the office around 5:30. Drove straight home. Nothing missing. Nothing strange. Monday morning, my boss, Gregory Finch, called me into his office at 9:45. He was a deliberate man, methodical in everything he did, which made the concern on his face particularly unsettling. "Hayes," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Security called me this morning. Apparently you were asking about Friday. Is everything all right?" I explained about the bloodstain, keeping my voice casual. "Probably nothing," I said, just trying to figure out if someone had an accident I might have assisted with. Gregory's expression didn't soften. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. There were no reported incidents on Friday. Security reviewed the logs. No ambulance calls, no accident reports filed. Nothing that would explain blood on your shirt. The knot in my stomach tightened. "Then I have no idea where it came from. You don't remember anything unusual? Any gaps in your day?" I thought about it carefully. No gaps. I was here from 8 in the morning until I left at 5:30. Gregory nodded slowly, but something in his eyes had shifted. "Look, I'm not trying to pry into your personal business, but if something's going on, health-wise or otherwise, you can talk to HR about medical leave or accommodations." I appreciated the concern, but it missed the point entirely. "I'm fine," I said. "Really. This is probably just some weird coincidence." But walking back to my desk, Gregory's question echoed in my mind. "Any gaps in your day? Why would he ask that specifically?" Olivia texted me at lunch. "Did you find anything out?" I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Nothing. No incidents reported at the building. Her response came immediately. "That's not comforting." "I know," I wrote. "I'll figure it out." But I didn't know how. That evening, Olivia had dinner with her sister, giving me time alone to think. I pulled up my phone's location history, something I'd never thought to check before. Friday's timeline showed exactly what I remembered. Home to office, office all day, office to home. Nothing unusual. I checked my credit card statements online. No strange charges. No purchases I didn't recognize. Everything was accounted for. Wednesday morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a vague sense of unease I couldn't explain. Olivia was already in the shower. I lay in bed, trying to pinpoint why I felt off. Had I been drinking last night? No, just water with dinner. Was I getting sick? My throat felt fine, no fever. Just this persistent fog in my head, like I'd slept poorly, except I'd gotten 8 solid hours. In the kitchen, making coffee, I noticed a bruise on my right forearm. Dark purple, roughly the size of a quarter, just above my wrist. I pressed it gently and winced. Fresh, maybe a day old. How had I not noticed this yesterday? Olivia came downstairs, hair still damp, and stopped when she saw me examining my arm. What happened? Another mystery, I said, showing her the bruise. I have no idea. Her face went pale again. That's the same arm. The same arm as what? The blood stain. It was on your left sleeve, but that's your right arm. She stepped closer, examining the bruise. That looks like someone grabbed you. Hard. The shape was oblong, almost like fingerprints pressing into flesh. My stomach dropped. I would remember someone grabbing me like this. This isn't normal, Olivia said quietly. Blood on your shirt you can't explain. Bruises appearing overnight. Ethan, something is wrong. I wanted to argue, to rationalize, but the evidence was literally written on my skin. You're right, I said. I'm going to my doctor today. Dr. Leonard Cross had been my primary care physician for 6 years. He listened to my explanation with the patient attention of someone who'd heard stranger things, then examined the bruise carefully. This could be from an IV or blood draw, he said. Have you had any medical procedures recently? No, nothing. He made notes on his tablet. Any history of sleepwalking? Blackouts, seizures, never. Dr. Cross ordered a full blood panel and told me results would be back in 3 days. In the meantime, he suggested I keep a detailed log of my activities and any physical symptoms. If this happens again, we'll have data to work with, he said. His calm professionalism was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Thursday passed normally. I worked, came home, had dinner with Olivia. We didn't talk about the blood or the bruise, both of us pretending everything was fine. But that night, lying in bed, I set an alarm for every 2 hours. If I was sleepwalking or having episodes I couldn't remember, I wanted to catch it happening. The alarms woke me at midnight, 2 a.m., and 4 a.m. Each time I was in bed, exactly where I should be. Olivia stirred at the 4 a.m. alarm and mumbled something about turning it off. I did, feeling foolish. What was I even looking for? Friday morning, Dr. Cross called my cell at 10:30 a.m. Ethan, I need you to come to my office immediately. The blood work came back, and there are some concerning findings. What kind of findings? I asked, my pulse quickening. I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you be here within the hour? I told Gregory I had a medical appointment and drove to Dr. Cross's office with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. In his examination room, he pulled up my lab results on his computer screen. Your blood panel shows traces of rohypnol, he said. His voice was measured, professional, but his expression was grave. That's a benzodiazepine commonly known as illegal drugs. The room tilted. What? How is that possible? The levels are low, consistent with exposure approximately 3 to 4 days ago, which would align with the time frame you mentioned. Dr. Cross turned to face me directly. Ethan, this drug causes amnesia and sedation. It's specifically used to incapacitate people. Someone drugged you. I couldn't process it. Who would drug me? Why? That's a question for law enforcement, Dr. Cross said, but I'm legally obligated to report this. Given the bruising, the unexplained blood, and now confirmed drug exposure, you may be the victim of a crime you don't remember. He picked up his desk phone. I'm calling the police right now. Detective Angela Reeves arrived at Dr. Cross's office 40 minutes later. She was a compact woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been with the police department for 19 years, she told me, most of them in special victims. Dr. Cross provided her with my blood test results while I sat there feeling like I was watching my life from outside my body. Detective Reeves asked me to start from the beginning, and I told her everything. The bloodstain, the bruise, the gaps in memory I hadn't even realized were gaps until now. She took notes in a small leather notebook, her handwriting surprisingly elegant. "When did you first notice symptoms?" she asked. "Sunday, when my fiancé found the blood. But the drug would have been administered before that. Probably Thursday or Friday. Do you go to bars, restaurants, anywhere someone could have access to your drinks?" "I go out for lunch sometimes," I said. "Coffee shops in the morning, but I'm careful. I don't leave drinks unattended." Detective Reeves looked up from her notebook. People who drug others are often very skilled at it. A moment of distraction is all they need. She asked for my schedule from the past week, names of places I'd been, people I'd interacted with. I gave her everything I could remember, which felt inadequate given I apparently couldn't trust my own memory anymore. "I need you to check something for me," Detective Reeves said. "Do you have a smartphone with location tracking?" I showed her my phone. She navigated to my location history and scrolled through the past week. Her finger stopped on Thursday night. "You were at an address on Maple Street from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Do you remember being there?" I stared at the map pin. Maple Street was across town, a neighborhood I had no reason to visit. "I was home Thursday night," I said. "Olivia can confirm it. Are you certain?" She pulled up a detailed timeline. "According to this, you left your house at 10:47 p.m., arrived at this address at 11:13 p.m., and returned home at 2:34 a.m. My hands started shaking. That's impossible. I was asleep. Olivia was right next to me. Detective Reeves's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Hayes, Rohypnol doesn't just cause memory loss. In sufficient doses, it can cause people to appear awake and functional while having no conscious control or later recollection of their actions. You may have driven yourself there and have absolutely no memory of it." The implications crashed over me like cold water. "What's at that address?" "I don't know," she said, "but we're going to find out." She made a call to her precinct, requesting a unit to check the Maple Street location. Then she turned back to me. "I need you to go home. Tell your fiancé what's happening, and don't go anywhere alone until we understand what's going on." Telling Olivia was worse than the blood test, worse than the detective's questions. I sat her down on our couch and explained everything. The drug in my system. The location history showing I'd been somewhere I didn't remember. The possibility that someone was using me while I was chemically incapacitated. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each sentence. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Someone is drugging you and taking you places." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why? What are they making you do?" "I don't know," I said. "But there was blood on my shirt, Olivia. What if I hurt someone while I was blacked out? What if I did something I would never consciously do?" She grabbed my hand, squeezing hard. "You didn't do anything. You're the victim here." But I could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that was eating me alive. What if I had hurt someone? What if that blood belonged to a person I'd harmed while under someone else's control? Detective Reeves called back 2 hours later. "The address on Maple Street is a residential property owned by a woman named Veronica Ashford. We knocked on the door, but no one answered. I'm getting a warrant to search the premises. In the meantime, I need you to think carefully. Does that name mean anything to you? Veronica Ashford." I repeated it several times, searching my memory. Nothing. I've never heard that name before. That night, I couldn't sleep. Olivia insisted I try, but every time I closed my eyes, I imagined myself driving across town in some unconscious fugue state, doing things I'd never remember. Around 3 a.m., I got up and searched Veronica Ashford online. There were dozens of results, none obviously connected to me. A real estate agent in California, a college professor in Vermont, a retired teacher in Florida. Without more information, the name was useless. I checked my phone's location history again, scrolling back further. There it was. The same Maple Street address appeared 8 times over the past 6 weeks. 8 times I'd apparently driven there, spent hours there, and come home with no memory of it. I woke Olivia up. She needed to see this. We sat at the kitchen table with my phone between us, staring at the evidence of a life I'd been living without knowing it. The pattern was irregular, sometimes twice a week, sometimes with 10 days in between, but always late at night. Always for several hours. How did I not notice? I said, more to myself than to her. How did I not wake up exhausted? How did I function the next day? Olivia was crying quietly. Because whoever's doing this knows exactly how much to give you. They're keeping you functional enough to return home and wake up the next morning like nothing happened. Detective Reeves executed the search warrant on Veronica Ashford's property Monday morning. She called me at noon with an update, and her voice was tight with controlled anger. Mr. Hayes, we found evidence in the house that suggests you've been there multiple times. There are photographs of you, documents with your signature, and a significant amount of medical equipment including needles, IV stands, and pharmaceutical-grade sedatives. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint. What was she doing to me? We're still processing the scene, but it appears you may have been subjected to some form of medical experimentation or unauthorized procedures. We found blood samples labeled with your initials and dates that correspond to your location data. The room spun. I sat down hard in my desk chair, Gregory's concerned face appearing in my peripheral vision. I waved him away. Detective Reeves continued. We've issued a warrant for Veronica Ashford's arrest, but she hasn't been at the property in at least 3 days. Her neighbors say she left in a hurry with multiple suitcases. We're treating this as an active investigation into assault, battery, and illegal medical practice. I need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. Can you be here this afternoon? I said yes, hung up, and immediately called Olivia. She answered on the first ring. They found medical equipment, samples of my blood. Someone's been experimenting on me. The police station interview room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Detective Reeves sat across from me with a younger detective named Marcus Joe, who specialized in medical crimes. They walked me through every detail I could remember from the past 2 months. Had I felt unusually tired? Yes, sometimes. Unexplained headaches? Now that I thought about it, yes. They showed me photographs from the Maple Street house, a bedroom set up like a medical examination room, restraints attached to a bed frame, charts tracking my vitals over weeks, the signatures on consent forms that look like mine but that I had no memory of signing. This is sophisticated, Detective Joe said. Whoever Veronica Ashford is, she has medical training and access to controlled substances. The equipment we found isn't something you can buy at a pharmacy. This is hospital-grade gear, likely stolen or obtained through fraudulent means. He pulled up a photo on his tablet. Do you recognize this? It showed a man's torso with what looked like injection sites marked in surgical pen. The birthmark on the right side was unmistakably mine. That's me, I said. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. When was this taken? Based on the metadata, approximately 3 weeks ago. Detective Joe's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Hayes, we found evidence suggesting you've undergone multiple blood transfusions or infusions at this location. We're working with a hematologist to analyze exactly what was administered to you. The word transfusions hit me like a physical blow. That would explain the bruises, the injection sites. But why? What was she transfusing? We don't know yet, Detective Reeves said, but we're going to find out. In the meantime, we need you to undergo a complete medical evaluation. We've arranged for you to see Dr. Kimberly Osei at County General Hospital. She's a toxicologist and hematologist who's helped us on cases like this before. She'll do a comprehensive workup and test for anything abnormal in your system. I agreed numbly, signing consent forms and authorization releases while my mind tried to process the impossible. Someone had been using me as a medical experiment for weeks, and I'd been completely unaware. Dr. Kimberly Osei was a tall woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd been practicing medicine for 22 years, she told me, and had worked as a consulting expert for law enforcement for the past decade. She drew what felt like a dozen vials of blood, performed a physical examination that was thorough to the point of uncomfortable, and asked questions about every aspect of my health. Have you noticed any changes in your energy levels? Your appetite? Your mental clarity? I admitted that I'd felt foggy lately, attributed it to stress at work. She made notes and ordered additional tests: MRI, full metabolic panel, liver and kidney function, screening for infectious diseases. The results came back over the next 3 days in waves, each one more concerning than the last. My liver enzymes were elevated, suggesting toxic exposure. My white blood cell count was abnormal in a way that indicated my immune system was responding to something foreign. Most alarming, Dr. Osei found traces of multiple pharmaceutical compounds in my system, some of which she couldn't immediately identify. "This is beyond my expertise," she admitted during our follow-up appointment. "I'm referring you to a colleague at the research hospital, Dr. Nathan Thornburg. He specializes in unusual toxicology cases and has access to more advanced testing equipment. Whatever was administered to you, it's not standard medical treatment." Olivia came with me to meet Dr. Thornburg. She'd barely left my side since the investigation began, her fear for my safety overriding her own work obligations. Dr. Thornburg worked in a laboratory that looked like something from a science fiction film, all gleaming equipment and computer screens displaying complex molecular structures. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with the intense focus of someone who lived for solving impossible puzzles. He reviewed Dr. Osei's findings and took additional blood samples. "I'm going to run a mass spectrometry analysis," he explained. "That'll tell us exactly what compounds are in your system, down to the molecular level. If someone's been giving you experimental drugs, we'll find them." The wait for results was torture. Olivia and I existed in a strange limbo where normal life continued on the surface, while underneath everything felt like it was collapsing. I went to work, sat through meetings, responded to emails, but I couldn't focus, couldn't engage, couldn't stop wondering what had been done to me during those missing hours. Gregory pulled me aside Wednesday afternoon and suggested I take medical leave. "This isn't about your performance," he said carefully. "It's about your health. Whatever you're dealing with, you need time to focus on that." I accepted gratefully, relieved to have one less thing to maintain the illusion of normalcy around. Detective Reeves called Thursday with an update on Veronica Ashford. "We've identified her," she said. "Or rather, we've identified who she actually is. Veronica Ashford is an alias. Her real name is Dr. Victoria Brennan, and she's a former research scientist who was fired from Biodyne Pharmaceuticals 3 years ago for ethical violations in human trials." The pieces started clicking together in my mind. She was conducting unauthorized experiments on me. "That's our working theory," Detective Reeves confirmed. "We've subpoenaed her records from Biodyne and reached out to former colleagues. It appears she was developing some kind of blood treatment or genetic therapy that the company deemed too dangerous for human testing. After her termination, she disappeared. Until now." Dr. Thornburg called Friday evening with results from the mass spectrometry. Olivia was sitting next to me on the couch when I answered, and she gripped my hand so tightly I lost circulation. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Thornburg said, his voice careful, "I've identified several compounds in your bloodstream that are consistent with experimental gene therapy vectors. These are not approved for human use. They're designed to alter cellular function at a genetic level." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him over the rush of blood in my ears. What does that mean? What did she do to me? "It means you've been subjected to what appears to be an unauthorized clinical trial of genetic modification therapy. The long-term effects are unknown because this treatment has never been tested in humans beyond laboratory settings." Dr. Thornburg paused. "I'm coordinating with Dr. Osei and several specialists in genetic medicine to determine what specific modifications were attempted and what the implications are for your health. This is going to require ongoing monitoring and possibly intervention to mitigate any adverse effects." I heard Olivia make a small broken sound beside me. "Can you reverse it?" I asked. "Can you undo whatever she did?" "We don't know yet," Dr. Thornburg said honestly, "but we're going to do everything we can to help you." The news broke 2 days later. An investigative journalist named Rebecca Liu had been following Biodyne Pharmaceuticals for years, writing about pharmaceutical ethics and corporate malfeasance. When Detective Reeves's investigation into Victoria Brennan crossed paths with Liu's research, the story exploded into national headlines. Former pharmaceutical scientist arrested for illegal human experimentation. The articles detailed Brennan's history at Biodyne, her firing for conducting unauthorized tests on unwitting subjects, and her 3-year disappearance before resurfacing to continue her work on victims like me. My name wasn't published, but everyone in my life knew who the article was referring to when it mentioned a local man subjected to months of genetic experimentation without consent. Brennan was arrested at a motel outside Nashville, Tennessee, attempting to cross into Mexico with forged documents. Detective Reeves called to tell me the news. She's in custody, being extradited back here to face charges. The evidence we've gathered is overwhelming. Her computers contain detailed logs of every procedure she performed on you, including her goals for the genetic modifications. It's going to make the prosecution's case very straightforward. What were her goals? I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. According to her notes, Detective Reeves said carefully, she was attempting to enhance immune function and cellular regeneration. Essentially, she was trying to create a treatment for aging and disease by modifying your genetic code to be more resistant to degradation. The absurdity of it hit me. She was trying to cure aging, using me as a test subject? Her research notes show she believed she'd made a breakthrough that Biodyne had wrongly suppressed. She was convinced that with continued testing, she could prove her treatment worked. You were her proof of concept, Mr. Hayes. She chose you because your health profile matched her ideal subject parameters. Young, healthy, with no genetic predispositions to major diseases. She'd been monitoring you for months before she made first contact. The violation went even deeper than I'd imagined. She'd studied me, selected me like a lab rat, and then systematically erased my ability to consent or even know what was being done to me. The legal proceedings moved forward with disturbing speed. Victoria Brennan was charged with multiple felonies: assault, battery, practicing medicine without a license, illegal possession of controlled substances, kidnapping, and human experimentation. Her attorney tried to argue diminished capacity, claiming she'd been acting under delusions of scientific progress. The prosecution destroyed that defense by presenting her meticulously organized research notes, which showed clear awareness that her actions were illegal and carefully planned to avoid detection. This wasn't the work of someone out of touch with reality. This was calculated predation dressed up as science. I testified at her preliminary hearing in late October. Olivia sat in the gallery with my parents, all of them watching as I walked through the timeline of discovering I'd been drugged, the location data, the medical equipment, the blood tests. Brennan's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination, suggesting I'd consented to participate in medical research and later changed my mind. But the prosecution had phone records showing Brennan had cloned my device to send fabricated consent forms from my email, making it look like I'd agreed to her procedures. The judge found sufficient evidence for trial and denied bail, citing Brennan as a flight risk and danger to public safety. Dr. Thornburg and his team worked for months trying to understand exactly what Brennan had done to my genetic code. The news wasn't all bad. Some of the modifications appeared to have enhanced my immune response, making me more resistant to common infections. My cellular repair mechanisms were functioning at above normal efficiency, which Dr. Thornburg cautiously suggested might have long-term health benefits. But there were unknowns, too. Genetic modifications could have cascading effects that took years to manifest. I'd need lifelong monitoring, regular testing, and immediate intervention if anything started going wrong. In essence, Brennan had turned me into a living experiment that would never truly end. The trial began in January. I sat through 3 weeks of testimony from medical experts, law enforcement, and former Biodyne colleagues who painted a picture of Victoria Brennan as a brilliant scientist whose obsession with her research had destroyed her ethical boundaries. The prosecution presented her journals, which contained disturbing entries about subject Hayes and her excitement over early positive results. She'd written about me like I was a specimen, not a person. Detailed observations of my physiological responses, notes about adjusting dosages, plans for future modifications she wanted to attempt. Reading those entries in court felt like being violated all over again. Brennan took the stand in her own defense, which her attorney clearly advised against. She was composed, articulate, and completely unrepentant. She testified that her research could revolutionize medicine, that she'd discovered something Biodyne had been too cowardly to pursue, that her work on me had been successful and proved her theories. She showed no remorse for the drugging, the memory loss, the months of secret procedures. In her mind, she'd done me a favor by selecting me for treatment that might extend my life by decades. The jury's expressions shifted from neutral to disgusted as she spoke. By the time the prosecution's closing arguments began, the verdict felt inevitable. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Brennan showed no reaction as the verdicts were read, just sat with her hands folded while her attorney slumped in defeat. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. During that wait, Dr. Thornburg published a medical case study about my situation in a prominent journal, anonymizing my identity, but detailing the genetic modifications and their effects. The publication sparked immediate debate in the scientific community about the ethics of genetic research and the need for stronger oversight. My private nightmare had become a catalyst for policy discussions I never wanted to be part of. At sentencing, I gave a victim impact statement that I'd written and rewritten dozens of times. I talked about the violation of my body, my autonomy, my basic human right to control what happened to me. I described the ongoing medical monitoring I'd require for the rest of my life, the uncertainty about long-term effects, the trauma of discovering I'd been living two lives without knowing it. I looked directly at Victoria Brennan and told her that her science didn't excuse her crimes, that brilliance without ethics was just cruelty with credentials. The judge sentenced her to 23 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Biodyne Pharmaceuticals also faced civil litigation for their inadequate security protocols that had allowed Brennan to steal research materials and pharmaceutical supplies. 18 months after finding blood on my shirt, Olivia and I postponed our wedding. Not canceled, just delayed until I felt more like myself again. Or rather, until I figured out who myself actually was now. The genetic modifications were permanent. Dr. Thornburg's team confirmed that attempting to reverse them would be more dangerous than leaving them in place. I was stuck with whatever Victoria Brennan had done to me, carrying her experiment in every cell of my body for the rest of my life. Some days that felt unbearable. Other days I tried to view it as just another chronic condition to manage, like diabetes or high blood pressure. A thing that happened to me that I didn't choose but had to live with anyway. The therapy helped. I started seeing Dr. Rachel Glendale, who specialized in trauma recovery for victims of medical abuse. She helped me process the violation, the loss of agency, the complicated feelings about being genetically modified without consent. We worked on reclaiming my sense of self and establishing boundaries around medical care. I'd developed severe anxiety around doctors and medical settings, which was problematic given I needed regular monitoring. Dr. Glendale taught me grounding techniques and helped me find providers who understood trauma-informed care. Slowly, over months, I started feeling less like a specimen and more like a person again. Olivia struggled too. She felt guilty for initially suspecting me when the blood appeared, even though her reaction had been completely reasonable. She had nightmares about the Maple Street house and what had been done to me there. We did couples therapy with Dr. Glendale's colleague, working through the trust issues and fear that had infected our relationship. It took time, patience, and a lot of difficult conversations. But gradually, we found our way back to each other. The wedding was rescheduled for September, small and private, just immediate family and close friends who'd supported us through the worst of it. 2 years after Victoria Brennan's conviction, Dr. Thornburg called with unexpected news. The genetic modifications you received appear to be stable and functioning as Brennan intended, he said. Your immune system is remarkably robust. You haven't had a single infection since the trial. Your cellular regeneration markers suggest you're aging slower than average for your demographic. I'm not saying what happened to you was justified, but from a purely medical standpoint, you may have benefited from her experiment. The statement sat uncomfortably in my mind. I didn't want benefits from what Brennan had done. I wanted my body back, unmodified. Mine. But that wasn't possible, and maybe finding meaning in the aftermath was better than remaining trapped in victimhood. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that advocated for victims of medical research abuses and human experimentation. My story, now public after Brennan's trial, made me a reluctant spokesperson for informed consent and research ethics. I testified before congressional committees about the need for stronger oversight of pharmaceutical research. I spoke at medical conferences about the patient perspective on experimental treatments. It wasn't a role I'd chosen, but it gave purpose to what had happened to me. If my nightmare could prevent someone else from becoming an unwitting test subject, maybe it wasn't entirely meaningless. Gregory retired, and I was promoted to his position, managing our department. Work became a welcome island of normalcy, where I could focus on budgets and projects instead of blood tests and medical monitoring. My colleagues knew what had happened. The news coverage had been too extensive to avoid, but they treated me with respectful distance rather than pity. I appreciated that more than they probably realized. I needed spaces where I was just Ethan Hayes, the manager, not Ethan Hayes, the genetic experimentation victim. Victoria Brennan appealed her conviction twice. Both appeals were denied. She remains in federal prison, where according to prison records obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, she works in the facility's medical unit under strict supervision. Detective Reeves told me she'd tried to establish correspondence with me through her attorney, wanting to discuss my ongoing health outcomes for her research purposes. I declined through my lawyer, making it clear I wanted no contact with her ever again. She'd stolen enough of my life. She didn't get to claim my future, too. On our 5th anniversary of surviving what we now just called the incident, Olivia and I went hiking in the mountains, something we'd done often before, but that had felt too vulnerable after, too exposed. We made it to the summit just as the sun was setting, sitting on a rocky outcrop and watching the light change across the valley below. "I don't think about it every day anymore," Olivia said quietly. I realized I didn't either. What happened would always be part of our story, but it wasn't the whole story. We'd survived, adapted, rebuilt. The scars were permanent, but so was our resilience. Dr. Thornburg's latest report showed my genetic markers remained stable. The modifications weren't causing cellular abnormalities or increased cancer risk, the two biggest long-term concerns. I'll need monitoring for the rest of my life, but the prognosis was as good as anyone could hope for given the circumstances. I'd beaten the odds, survived something that could have killed me or left me permanently damaged. In its own twisted way, Victoria Brennan's obsessive attention to detail in her research had saved me even as it violated me. She'd been meticulous enough in her modifications that they'd integrated successfully rather than triggering catastrophic rejection. Sometimes I wonder about the parallel universe where Olivia never noticed the blood on my shirt, where I continued living two lives, unconscious of what was being done to me during those chemically induced blackouts. How long would Brennan have continued? What else would she have tried? The thought makes me sick, but it also makes me grateful for Olivia's attention to detail, for her refusal to accept easy explanations. She'd saved me by asking questions, by insisting on answers when I wanted to dismiss the evidence. That blood stain had been a message I'd been too drugged to send consciously, but my body had delivered it anyway. Evidence of something wrong. A cry for help written in rust-colored smears on white fabric. The wedding happened in September, small ceremony under trees with leaves just starting to turn. Dr. Glendale attended, along with Detective Reeves and Dr. Thornburg and his wife. People who'd been part of the worst chapter of our lives, now celebrating as we tried to write better ones. I stood at the altar watching Olivia walk toward me and thought about all the ways this could have ended differently. The timelines where I never found out, where Brennan's experiments went wrong and killed me, where Olivia believed I was having an affair and left. We'd survived all those possibilities and arrived here, together, choosing each other again despite everything. Our first dance was to a song we'd picked years ago, before the incident, before Victoria Brennan, before genetic modifications and federal trials. Dancing with Olivia, I felt present in my body in a way I hadn't since discovering I'd been violated. This was my life, my choice, my moment. Whatever Brennan had done to my cells and chromosomes, she hadn't touched this. The ability to love someone, to commit, to build a future despite not knowing exactly what that future held. Everyone lives with uncertainty about their health, their longevity, their genetic fate. Mine was just more documented than most. 5 years later, Dr. Thornburg published a follow-up study on my case. The genetic modifications had remained stable. My health outcomes were statistically better than average for my age group. I'd avoided every cold and flu that circulated through my office. Cuts and injuries healed faster than they should. The unintended consequence of being Victoria Brennan's proof of concept was that her treatment appeared to actually work. Not that it justified anything she'd done, but the medical community was now studying my case to understand if similar modifications could be ethically developed for willing patients. My violation might eventually help develop treatments that saved lives. I started writing about my experience. First in private journals Dr. Glendale suggested for processing trauma. Then in op-eds about medical ethics and patient rights. Eventually in a book that took 3 years to finish, detailing everything from finding the blood on my shirt to standing in that courtroom watching Brennan sentenced. The book wasn't a bestseller, but it found its audience. Other victims of medical abuse reached out, sharing their stories. Medical students wrote saying it changed how they thought about patient consent. Research ethicists used it in classes about the history of human experimentation abuses. My private nightmare became public testimony, documentation that these violations still happened, even now, even in supposedly regulated systems. Olivia and I decided not to have children. The genetic modifications made it unclear what I might pass on, and the uncertainty felt too risky. We talked about adoption instead, still figuring out what parenthood might look like for us. Dr. Thornburg said my modifications likely weren't heritable, that they'd been somatic rather than germline changes, but likely wasn't certain enough when it came to creating new life. Maybe someday when the research was more definitive. Or maybe we'd build our family differently, and that would be fine too. What happened to me had changed our life trajectory in 1,000 ways, but we were still choosing our own path forward even if the starting point wasn't one we'd selected. Detective Reeves retired after 31 years on the force. She sent me an invitation to her retirement party with a note saying my case had been one of the most important of her career. Not because it was the most violent or the most publicized, but because it exposed a vulnerability in how we think about medical crime. People imagine human experimentation as something that happened in the past, in Nazi Germany or Tuskegee. They don't imagine it happening to a regular office worker in a modern American city. My case proved it could happen to anyone, that predators adapted and that oversight had gaps they could exploit. I still get my blood tested every 6 months, still see Dr. Thornburg's team for monitoring. The appointments have become routine, almost boring, which I've learned to appreciate. Boring means stable. Boring means no unexpected changes or concerning developments. Boring means I get to live a relatively normal life, despite having genetic code that shouldn't exist outside a laboratory. I've made peace with being a medical anomaly. Some people have rare conditions, unusual biology, anomalies that make them interesting to doctors. I just happen to have mine because someone decided to experiment on me while I was unconscious. Not the origin story anyone would choose, but it's mine, and I've learned to carry it. 10 years after the blood on the shirt, I ran into someone at a conference who'd read my book. They thanked me for writing it, said it had helped them recognize they were being medically abused by a trusted doctor. They'd gotten out, reported it, and were now in recovery. Standing there in a hotel conference room, listening to this stranger tell me my story had saved them. I felt something shift. What happened to me would always be a violation, always be wrong, always be traumatic. But it had also become something more. Evidence that speaking up mattered, that testimony could protect others, that even the worst experiences could be transformed into something that helped people survive. Olivia and I celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary with a trip to Iceland. We hiked on glaciers and soaked in hot springs and watched the northern lights dance across the sky. Away from doctors and monitoring and the constant low-level awareness of my modified biology, I almost felt normal. Just a man on vacation with his wife, marveling at natural wonders. The aurora flickered green and purple overhead, and Olivia squeezed my hand. "We made it," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "We did." Victoria Brennan died in prison of a heart attack when I was 43. I got a notification from the Victim Services Office asking if I wanted to make a statement for the record. I declined. She'd taken enough of my time and energy. I wasn't going to spend more on her death than I had to. I did feel something, though. Not relief, exactly, but closure. The person who'd violated me was gone, and I was still here, still healthy, still living the life she'd tried to make impossible. That felt like victory enough. Dr. Thornburg finally retired at 71, passing my ongoing care to a younger colleague he'd trained. Dr. Lisa Chen was brilliant, thorough, and treated me like a patient rather than a curiosity. The genetic modifications remain stable, she told me at my latest appointment. "You're essentially a walking proof that targeted genetic therapy can work. Several research teams want to study your case to develop ethical versions of what was done to you. Would you be willing to participate?" I thought about it carefully. Participation would mean more blood draws, more tests, more time in medical offices. But it would also mean something good, coming from what Brennan did. I agreed, with strict conditions about consent and control. I'm 52 now. The genetic modifications mean I look younger than my age, heal faster, rarely get sick. Strange benefits from a nightmare I didn't choose. Olivia and I adopted 2 children, siblings from the foster system who needed a stable home. We told them age-appropriately about my medical history, about being a survivor of something bad that happened. They accepted it the way kids accept all kinds of parental oddities, with pragmatic interest and then returning to their own concerns. Being a father has been the most normal thing I've done since before Brennan, the most ordinary, beautiful, chosen thing. Sometimes I still dream about the Maple Street house, about lying on that medical bed while someone I didn't know altered my fundamental biology. I wake up gasping, and Olivia holds me until the panic fades. Dr. Glendale says the trauma will probably never fully disappear, that what happened was too profound for complete healing. But she also says I've done remarkable work integrating it into my life, rather than letting it define my life. I've chosen to be more than what was done to me. That's all any survivor can do. Choose who we become after the nightmare ends. The genetic modifications Victoria Brennan gave me will last my entire life. So will the scars from how she gave them. But so will my marriage to Olivia, my relationship with my children, the work I've done advocating for medical ethics. She tried to turn me into her proof of concept, her evidence that her theory worked. Instead, I became proof that survivors can reclaim their stories. That violation doesn't have to equal destruction. That even when someone steals your body's autonomy, they can't take your choice to build meaning from the aftermath. That bloodstain on my shirt was the beginning of discovering I'd been living 2 lives. Now, decades later, I'm finally living just one. The one I choose, every day, despite the genetic modifications I'll carry forever. Victoria Brennan gave me altered DNA. But I gave myself everything that came after. The recovery, the advocacy, the family, the peace. She got prison and an early death. I got a life I built from the ruins of what she tried to destroy. If you made it this far, hit like, you've earned it.